It's gone up a little bit, but so everybody's impacted, one, especially if they don't have a diversified water supply.
Other questions? No. Well, I want to thank you for putting a human face on the issues in front of us. We will hear more from many parts of the state on that, and thank you for also helping make the point that there are multiple benefits at work, and it's not as simple as folks may seem. It may think it is in terms of fish versus exports. It's all mixed up because everybody's connected, and there's an impact all around. So thank you for illuminating that as well. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. We're now scheduled to go to the technical panel. It's slated to go a long time. I also have the folks who are going to have to leave that I asked for time at around noon. I was going to give about 30 minutes. That's going to be a challenge, sort of a break for public participation. So I would then stop midway through the technical panel. But I'm fine with that if you guys are, because I'm assuming the technical panel is going to stay with us most of the day to listen to all the comments. Is that all right? Great. I know I have some folks who want to go after lunch. I also am mindful we'll start at, we'll take a break at 12:30 for lunch and come back right at 1 with the Friant panel. They have to leave at 1:30. So there will be a break, and then the technical panel will come back. You'll be a sandwich, kind of, through the course of the day. I wish everybody could sit and listen to everybody, but it's not. It's probably not to be. We can hear it in a nonlinear way because we'll be here all day. Is that all right? Okay. Technical panel? For the first part. And you may also be faster than the time you asked for, so we'll see. But we're going to have questions for you throughout the course of the day, so. Yeah, that was good. I'm going to start taking public at 12 till 12:30. We'll break from 12:30 to 1, and then we'll start up with Friant. And then we'll go to another panel that's here. I think Les has been going back and forth. I mean, there are other public that put in cards too, so it's not just them for half an hour.
We're working on logistics for
No,
looking
that's
forward
fine.
to
Figure
the break.
out your order, introduce all yourselves in the order you think you're going to speak. You may not all be speaking, just give us a sense, but introduce yourself so that everybody listening and watching can know who's here, and we'll be back later.
I'll start off. Bill Croyle again with the California Department of Water Resources, Drought Management.
Yeah, it's John Lehi, also with the State Department of Water Resources, but with State Water Project Operations.
I am Ron Milligan. I'm the Operations Manager for the CVP with Reclamation.
I'm Carl Winyep, Branch Chief of Water Operations and Delta Constitutions for NOAA Fisheries.
I'm Mike Chakowski. I'm the Field Supervisor of the Bay Delta Fish and Wildlife Office for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Carl Wilcox, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Policy Advisor to the Director for the Delta.
Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for accommodating the public in a little while.
That's our lesson in this drought: adaptable and flexible.
That's
as
it.
we all
Adaptable
move
and
through
flexible. Very good.
Again, Bill Croyle. I'm going to give kind of the initial set of our technical briefing. We have quite a few slides that provide, I think, an overview of both where our water is, whether it's on the ground or where it is in our reservoirs. And so there's a lot of hydrographs. I'm going to try to go at the speed that works for everyone, and I'll try to kind of point out not everything, but the highlights as it kind of leads into our discussion points for today.
Great, and these will be posted presumably by sometime today or now, or, I'm looking at you. How long will it take to post them?
We can have that posted today. We'll have it done during the meeting.
Great, thanks. Then you can go faster.
And then we're also willing, to, if there's questions that come out outside of this venue, just to get at what's behind these graphics. A lot of this information that I'm going to present is available on the web through our CDEX site on a continuous basis. And many of these graphics are being updated on a daily basis as we move through this environment. As I kind of left off with snow, as kind of where we're at on snow. Snow obviously is an important part of our water equation here, with not a lot of snow above our reservoirs right now in our upper watersheds. But what I probably should have also done is given kind of a quick snapshot, which I commonly do, but because of the graphics are about a month old, I didn't include the graphics with regard to the current climatic forecasts that are out, the next 5 days, 10 days, 14 days, 30 days, and the 90-day schedule. So like in the last month or so, kind of these short-term climatic forecasts are kind of warmer for California and dry, kind of the probability is pretty much average, but we're kind of also look at this as being continued dry conditions. And so just I looked this morning, so the graphics for the 8 to 14 day, which is kind of getting at the edge of our forecasting period. Again, it looks dry as we've seen, but also there's a hint of moisture in, say, Southern California. That being said, when I saw that this morning, I went out and looked at our global forecasting system models that we like to rely on here on the West Coast. And so it looks like 10 days out, which is kind of getting edge of our comfort zone. It does look like we have potential rain forecast for California. And then if you go out into what we call, some of us call the fantasy forecasting, a positive look, and some of this, it does look wet for a period of time. Now, when I say that with some caution because we've seen a lot of that this past month, where 14 days, or longer outlook pretty wet, and then all of a sudden a day later, and then it evaporates. But I think we are in that 10-day period, which, again, is at the edge where we actually see some things that looking like they may solidify with regard to a rainfall event, which we desperately need. And I would like to get back and exercise my flood operations in an effort to protect our locals if we do get into some significant weather. With that being said, I'll start off with kind of looking at our three indexes that we look at where we're at on where the water has fallen here in California. This is our Northern California 8-station index, which we talk a lot about. This is actually a critical watershed for our state and federal water projects and actually provide quite a bit of water throughout the state. Obviously, our key reservoirs being Shasta, Oroville, are also in this area as well as some other smaller reservoirs, but also important. And so the graphic, what we have here, and this is kind of typical with the graphics we'll see here, we've included the 2012-13 plot as well as the 13-14, which on this slide is a little lower. Our average, which is that blue shaded area of the graph, and then kind of our driest, which 1923-24 or 1976-77. And I think the conditions that we've been in this past year, we're always looking at where we are with respect to the 1967 76, 77, traces as we look at both our indexes but also our reservoirs. So this graphic right now for the 2014-15 water years, right now we have 30.3% or 96% of our rainfall for this particular watershed. Okay, that's important. It's quite a bit better than last year. The last year being a blue line that kind of ended up at about 31.3. And so
that just means we have a shot.
Well, we're better than last year.
If
we don't get any more rain.
It's not saying a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, if it doesn't rain, in this watershed for the rest of, the season, which you can see if you look at to the right of this graph, we don't have too many big bumps. We'd end up kind of close to where we were last year.
Well, and
our
also
hope is, of course, we would get some additional rain in this watershed.
And also, isn't there an issue on timing? I mean, we've already gotten the precip. If we kind of fall off the cliff, it looks better. But last year, we were picking up opportunities later than where we are right now.
Yeah. I tried to anticipate your question or comment. This is actually where the rain, the average precip for the 8-station index, and the blue line is our average, and the red line is where the rain has come in the months that we've seen so far, and it gives us kind of an idea of where we are or where we might look to on an average rainfall in this particular watershed. So March, April, and May obviously taper off, but we've been through, as stated before, our 2 wettest months are kind of almost in the bag here. I'm not sure we're going to get too much more. What we might at the very end of February to get us up to average. But as you can see, January is really dry for a very important watershed, although we had a nice shot in December. But looking forward at those March, April, May, we're on the downslope of what we expect for rainfall for this particular region. That being said, again, things have been tending to be dry. So this is our 5-station index for the San Joaquin watershed. This is certainly important for the Central Sierra reservoirs and some of the areas that we've talked about here as a group this morning. Again, these graphics are a little bit tighter with regard to the last 3 years dry conditions, and again we have that 1976 and 1923 graphic there at the bottom. Our average for this index right now is 52%, and we're sitting at 12.9 inches when our average is 40 inches. And so again, if we look at how that might step up here in the next couple months with the potential for rainfall, we definitely need a couple more big bumps to get close to our average condition. This is critical as we kind of look for, moving forward, and of course equation is part of both of these, and the next index is of course where's snow with regard to above these conditions, so that factors that in. This is kind of getting back to the rainfall questions. Might it look like? And this is a little bit more difficult to look at because we didn't have those big rainfall events in this watershed that we saw in December. We did get some rain, but certainly not near as much as we saw in that upper watershed on the Sacramento. But again, all of the rainfall we did receive was below average as you look at this particular region. And again, the idea is to look at what might be forecast for average conditions, ranging from 6 inches in March, and then obviously tapering off very quickly through our spring and early summer. Any questions on that? Our Tulare Lake Basin 6-station index, this is one that we've started to use this year quite a bit because of course the kind of a lack of rainfall, and then also tracking what our snowpack is in this particular area. So again, the same graphics. This one's even tighter than we saw in the 5-station and certainly the 8-station. There again, we're sitting at 49%, 8.6 inches of average rainfall year would be 29. Again, the blue area being our average. Same with the plots. So there's obviously hope and room for improvement on this rainfall, but if you look at these previous dry years, it kind of tapers off pretty quickly here. So I'm going to move into reservoirs. Again, I'll speed up or slow down depending on the board's interest. So this is the graphic on the left is one is really important reservoir. We have one for flood. We have one for water supply. This is the water supply graphic. This is updated at midnight every night. Those of us that are trying to track some of this, especially when the big storm events, it was refreshing to see Shasta come up as fast as it did during a pretty intense weather event.
Nice.
Folsom as well.
Do you have an app for this, the way the Australians do?
Do we what?
I have an app with all the storages in Australia on my phone. Can we do
we're,
that?
We're pushing all options
That would be good.
out to especially because it allows you to dovetail not only just the reservoir, but the hydrographs as well as inflow and outflow. So those are things that our hydrology group is continuing to move forward on. This graphic came out of, it's been produced for water supply for a while, and the flood side of the equation got into it, and then all of a sudden there's a whole bunch more wants and needs, and that's what the new technologies allowed us to do with some of the new software we have. So you can get at this information in real time and actually be able to, at home, boil down into some of the details, to kind of answer your own questions. And our CDEC staff and our Flood Operations Center are willing to help anyone that wants to poke this website and kind of work through this from an education standpoint. We're always there to try to assist others in understanding better what this information is conveying and what it doesn't. So on the right side of the graph, this was updated on the 17th, yesterday at 9 o'clock in the morning. Again, there has been an updated graphic that came out last night, but hasn't really changed too much because we didn't see a lot of rainfall. There was some inflow into these reservoirs, but because of this past rainfall, that's tapered off quite a bit. But as you can see, we have definitely, if we looked at this last January, it wasn't as good as it is now, especially like for Folsom. So we hit 103% of average. We also see New Maloney's on the other side of the equation sitting at 25% of capacity or 42% of average, and then, or San Luis. So I'll want to move through the hydrographs for each of these reservoirs and a couple others that we've added.
Can I ask a question? Why do you not have, and probably it's obvious, you don't have metropolitan storage in Southern California?
Well, we look to them for laying that out. We haven't, we actually switched out one of the reservoirs. There's a little note at the very bottom for Pyramid for Paris because of the kind of the role of that reservoir played within the overall state water picture. Certainly we could produce that graphic. We haven't yet. And as we better understand just the dynamics of local water supply within Southern California. Certainly the Colorado River in certain areas of Southern California plays into, the balancing and moving water around.
Well, since so many people are down there,
Right.
depending on water,
Right.
it just seemed missing.
So is there any questions on this graphic before I move on?
No, thanks for putting it all together that way.
Okay, we'll start off with Trinity. We'll move down the state. So
And
Trinity,
you probably can go through this fairly quickly. I'm mindful of all the people listening and trying to move through it.
right. So again, we try to colorize the graphics or standardize. The red line is that 76, 77, and 70, or 76, 77, 77, 78, which is when we had our last serious drought. And then the triangle red lines is where we kind of came out of the drought. So as we kind of look at what's going on and where we're at with regard to, again, reflecting back to that past drought, we're doing a lot of comparisons along those lines. Sometimes we're tracking pretty close, and then more recently for 2015, we're not tracking at all, in my opinion, like 1977, 78. So again, we continue dry conditions. So in this case, the blue line is our current storage, and you can kind of see the storm events that happened here recently and the effect of those storms on the Trinity Lake. So we're sitting at 45% capacity and 73%. Here's Shasta Reservoir. So we're at 2.5 million acre feet. Above last year's, which is the black line, and well above the 76, 77. Lake Oroville is, again, above this last year, slightly above the 1976, 77. So we're sitting at 47% and of capacity and 70% of historic average. The average is that blue shaded area on the graphic. Folsom Lake. Remember last year we were in dire conditions within Folsom Lake, and then it rained quite a bit in the American River watershed, almost nowhere else as well in the state. Really did take care of a serious water supply problem for Folsom, and certainly the local water agencies got it and stepped up and have done an amazing job of doing both infrastructure, conservation, and a number of things, which they're continuing to do as a result of those dire water conditions about this time last year. So this reservoir looks quite a bit different than last year, as you can tell by the black line, and you can see the storms that came in February and March in this watershed. Exchequer. This one's difficult. This is, of course, moving down on the Central Sierras. This is kind of one of our tougher spots that we have In the state, 8% of capacity, 16% of average historic, 81, almost 82,000 acre feet. Well below the 1976, 77 drought elevations, and well below last year. New Maloney's Reservoir, so we're 42% of average capacity, sitting at 600,000 acre feet, above 1976, 77. We just started to fill that one. Lake Don Pedro, again, is about 142,000 acre feet, above 76, 77, but below this last year. Then San Luis Reservoir, which is our joint operations off-channel storage. So we're just crossed over the line for the 1976-77 line and well above this last year.
I have a question on San Luis. Because of the, that's shared storage, state, federal. What's the normal percentage compared to what it is now because of the COA issue with, I think there's some additional balance on the state side from what I understand. So do you know how it affects the percentage of storage?
I don't. I'm going to look to our project operators.
We're racing for the microphone. The COA balancing question would not affect, let's say, total storage, but as we work to balance COA through the through the summer and into the fall and then this winter, right now I think the state's probably, just to say, 2/3 roughly of that storage.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But I think we're pretty close to balancing out the COA books, if you will. So that doesn't affect the amount of storage that's in San Luis, but our working of balancing of the pumping that we've done through the last 6 months have created correcting the imbalance that we developed over the summer and fall.
Oh.
So I hope that
I did
answers
not
the
know
question. It doesn't affect these numbers per se, but indirectly the percentage of how much of that water is CVP water versus state water project water has been the product of kind of balancing up the books in terms of who could take the pumping in the Delta.
And just for the benefit of others that don't know what the COA is, could you just describe what the COA is and the balancing that had to take place?
Yeah, generally, the COA is the Coordinated Operating Agreement. And it's agreement from around 1986 between the United States government and the state of California, specifically how we would share available supplies between the CVP and the State Water Project, as well as which project has responsibility, how we share the responsibility to meet in-basin depletions, water rights requirements, and then outflows, water quality requirements in the Delta. So that agreement lays out how this sharing would take place between the two projects, because as you know, many of the requirements under, particular Delta permits, T1641, are the joint responsibility of the two projects. So how we share meeting that responsibility is rooted in the Coordinated Operating Agreement. And given that and the conditions of this last year and just the multitude of various constraints and needs upstream and how we could operate, the balancing of the books on that, which we typically try to keep fairly in balance on let's say a monthly basis or every few weeks, became very exaggerated in the favor of the state. That at some period of time in the fall and as we got into the winter, it was the state's turn to be able to pump water. Mm-hmm. And that's basically the balancing that has taken place over time. So if we go back and we tried to look at the percentages of water in San Luis back in the summer, we probably saw a much different percentage at that point between the amount of water each project had, but we had the CVP owing the next available increment of pumping to the state. So that's the 45-second COA discussion.
And so the impact on that, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but in practical terms, what is the impact of that? I'm sure we'll hear about it from some of the folks who are speaking later, since they also petitioned us last year on it. But last year there was a concern that because of the way that played out, there was less water to the exchange contractors because there was less water to the CVP, and therefore they made the call on Friant. Does it look any better this year, or what does it mean compared to last year?
Well, I think that this will kind of depend on the hydrology the next couple of months. As Bill said, we've got historically, March is usually a pretty decent month, and April, May is nothing to discount. So how that looks is going to play a large part into things like depletions in the Sac Valley, because that has a significant hydrology driven component to it. It's also going to play into, I think, the cold water pool, how we can get water out of Shasta. When we have more ample supplies there and a little more flexibility in managing the cold water pool, how we would deal with COA imbalances through the summer would be to incrementally add some more release at Shasta. When we are very constrained there, trying to get through the temperature operations, that becomes a backlog, and then the state has to then make releases from Oroville to keep up with some minimal pumping regime, but then that creates an imbalance on these books for COA, which then creates a payback that's taken place, as we said now. So it's very complicated. It's hard to say how the hydrology is going to play and just how much water we're able to get south of Delta, whether it's for refuges or exchange contractors, and then how that may interplay with the Friant supplies.
Right. I mean, 'cause, a regular person, by which I mean a regular person, looking at this would say, well, there's so much more south of Delta than there was last year at this time, although it did go up because of some of the coordination. So it's not that much, but it's still higher than at its best last year, that somehow that should give some measure of relief compared to last year. But what you're saying, it's all connected to all the reservoir operations.
I think it is, and I think John maybe has a perspective on the state project component of this.
Yeah, I was actually going to get into some of this during my presentation. As far as what we see in the surface storages it's just a fraction of really the water supply that we have available to work with. And the number looks big in relation to last year on here, but really, to put it in perspective, we're not talking about a whole lot more water than the snowpack is really the driver here. And that's kind of what I'll get into as part of my presentation.
Right.
As well.
It is very complicated.
Yeah.
Bill, are you just about done? Because then I would let you wrap up before we go to the half hour of public presentation.
John and I were just talking about the handoff, and so I'm done, and I'm not sure if you want to.
Yeah. So my presentation, there's a little bit of foundational. There's about 4 slides that are foundational before I really get into more deeply into the TUCP.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to let the public speak for a half
That's
hour. I really
that's
appreciate
fine.
all your indulgence. It's an impossible juggling trick. We'll be here as long as we need to be, but I am mindful of the folks who drove many hours and have to go. Are you all right with that? Because that's what. Okay. So, Ms. Townsend. Well, I want to be fair. I'd almost want to alternate. Some people came early today. I want to take a half hour of talks. I don't know how many cards came from that one group, but we have a room full of people. All right. Well, I think I might have to alternate because it's not fair to the folks who are here first thing unless they don't mind. But I was hoping you guys would have figured that out somehow. Well, no, but I already said we would take some of those folks. So let's take some of those folks, but let me have the people who also came at 9, and I'm going to do some of those. Presumably, folks who actually have to leave have told you. But again, it's hard to accommodate that because it could be the whole room. All right, and so which one is this that you're handing me? All right, let me have that other group too, though. Oh, okay, you've got to get them up on the list. All right, so we'll take, hopefully that means we'll just take a couple. Marcus Yasutake, Environmental and Water Resources Director, City of Folsom. You did ask earlier to speak earlier, and I'm sorry I didn't take you, but.
All right, this is on. Thank you, Chair Marcus, members of the board. Again, Marcus Yasutake, Environmental and Water Resources Director for the City of Folsom. I'm here on behalf of the City of Roseville, City of Folsom, and San Juan Water District. I want to thank Senator Nielsen for his comments earlier in support of our three agencies, and especially for the City of Roseville.
Oh, sorry, 1 second. It's 3 minutes, not 5. We have way too many. I would make it 2, given how many cards you just gave me, but go ahead
problem.
with
We'll
3,
make it quick.
because I didn't tell you in advance. But,
Not a problem. Also,
but don't take all 5.
Okay, will do. Also want to thank the board and staff for their work in 2014 and what seems to be already a challenging 2015. So thanks for your work last year. Also thanks, we deal directly with reclamation, so thanks to their office in Folsom and their Central Valley operations partners. They work well with us and give us quite a bit of updates. And when we ask questions, they are quick to answer. So we want to thank their staff. As Senator Nielsen mentioned, we serve about 500,000 folks. We are all directly diverters or direct diverters from Folsom Reservoir. And I should also mention water is also served to Folsom State Prison. They're not here today, but they receive that water as well. Our agencies support the executive director's order in terms of increasing storage in upstream reservoirs, so we do appreciate that order. We don't have a specific opinion on the delta outflows. Doesn't really serve any purposes for us in that regard, so we don't have any specific opinions on that. Okay. Our intake is in Folsom Dam, so at a certain elevation, about 320 feet in the reservoir, and at about 100,000 acre feet, that intake would go dry, leaving us with very limited options in order to serve our constituents. So we appreciate the fact that we are conserving water, and although the graphics show Folsom being better than this year than it was last year, if you look at the original drought contingency plan and you identify in their tables where flow releases could be if the TUCP was not granted, and we're looking at end of September storages in the 65 to 85,000 or 180,000 to 210,000 acre feet at the end of September, which doesn't bode well if you're going into a dry fall and a dry winter coming out that next year. So we just wanted to state our support for the temporary urgency change petition and the granting of upstream reservoir elevation. And with that, I'll turn over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ready yet? Nope. Not quite ready yet? Okay. Barbara Berrigan-Perea from Restore the Delta. Hello.
Hello. Thank you, Chair Marcus, and thank you, board members. We appreciate the opportunity to speak. We understand the difficult position that the board and staff are in presently. And we recognize your attempt to keep flows in the Delta. Tim Stroshane, our policy analyst, will be on a panel later to discuss our participation in our protest comments with other environmental groups. I think what's important that I want to remind everyone here today is about the economic value of fresh water to the San Francisco Bay Delta estuary. 38% roughly of the population in the 5 Delta counties is an environmental justice population. Of that, 32% are Spanish speaking. Tens of thousands of people in the 5 Delta counties fish for sustenance. So when we look at economic impacts, we have to remember that a lack of freshwater flows impacts Delta farm workers, Delta farm communities, Delta fishing recreation industries, the jobs tied to that. So there is definitely an impact and an equally number of people who are economically challenged in the 5 Delta counties. We'd also like to add that freshwater, besides adding to the intrinsic value of a healthy Bay Delta, contributes to a $1.5 billion commercial salmon fishing industry, a $5.2 billion annual Delta agricultural economy, a $750 million Delta recreational economy, and other bay fisheries. As water quality deteriorates out into the bay, there's impact on the crab fisheries. People have not made the connection that at Pier 39 and Pier 41, the millions of tourists that go down there every year, they don't really go to buy the San Francisco t-shirt. They go to eat crab, they go to eat salmon. And that is part of the cultural draw. That economy is tied to a healthy Bay Delta estuary. We hope that you take that into consideration when balancing needs within the state and recognize that without adequate flow this year, we really stand the risk of losing important species for good, and extinction is forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Helping to convey the complexity. Thank you. All right, I'm going to get through as many as I can and do a little bit of alternating. I'm sorry, I can't read this, so forgive me, I get it wrong. It looks like Volsuda Acosta. Acosta? Good, thank you so much. Sorry, I just couldn't read your writing. If you'll introduce yourself from here on. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, Spanish.
Oh, yes. All right. So note that on the, that'll just, right, just note it on the time. So you won't take it out of her time.
Vengo de la comunidad de Huron y la falta de agua afecta a mí y a mi familia.
I come from the community of Huron, California, and the lack of water affects my community and my family.
Porque no hay trabajo en el valle y tengo que ir a trabajar hasta Broadley y ahora por falta de agua vamos a ir hasta Boston, Arizona.
Okay. Because of the lack of work in the Central Valley, she's having to go far to Brawley, California, and up to Arizona.
Y luego ahora vamos a ir a Boston. Vamos a ir a Boston, Arizona, mucho más lejos. Afecta nuestra salud porque es mucho calor allá. Es un cambio, no nos más afecta a nuestra familia, sino nuestra salud por falta de agua.
Okay, the drastic change is affecting her health, all attributed to the lack of water, having to go to Arizona where the heat is immense.
Sí, aparte de nuestra salud, dejamos a nuestros hijos porque no hay agua aquí y luego los biles no nos esperan y tenemos que trabajar. Y todo porque por el agua afecta a nuestros niños, porque también los sacamos de las escuelas y es un cambio brusco para los niños.
Okay, yes, and this adversely affects my children, having to leave school and their health.
Y pues les pedimos de favor que nos puedan apoyar con el agua porque no somos muchas familias que dejamos nuestras casas, nuestros hogares para salir a buscar el trabajo a otros lugares.
And I please ask for your consideration when it comes to water issues in my community, because it's many families like myself and in my community, families and children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Marisol Acosta. Another Acosta.
Yo vengo de Huron, me llamo Marisol Acosta y yo como madre de familia, la sequía me ha afectado en que tenemos que sacar a nuestros hijos de las escuelas para buscar más lejos trabajos. Para ellos, para que se acostumbren está difícil o los tenemos que dejar en casa y está muy difícil para... Y sí.
Reiterating what she said, that she too has to travel far for work, and when she's in a situation where she has to take her children out of school, it's hard for the children to get used to that lifestyle.
Y si no hay agua, no hay trabajo y es más difícil para mantenerlos. Y pues ahora como que ya está medida el agua porque ya no podemos que jueguen en una alberca los niños, ni lavar carros, ni ya como el agua como que está contada, tener que bañarse uno rápido, lavarse los dientes rápido, todo rápido y está difícil y es muy cara el agua y no tenemos para pagarlo.
And because of the water situation, it's hard, simple, leisurely things such as the children being able to play in a small swimming pool or wanting to wash a car. Well, of course, those things aren't possible.
No, pues y queremos que si nos pueden ayudar con el agua porque es muy difícil y muchas gracias.
Yes, and asking for your help, your consideration with the water issues because it's a very hard life. Thank you.
Gracias. Alvaro Preciado, Mayor Pro Tem, City of Avenal.
Hello, Alvaro Preciado, come from the city of Avenal. I would like to address the issues that our community is facing. Our community, it's also a farm working base. We don't have any businesses. There's no other ways for our community members to make a living by going out to the fields. One of the issues is not only in Avenal, but also the surrounding communities that get aqueduct water from the California aqueduct, is that the poor quality that we're getting right now, it's affecting potable water. We have to use more chemicals in order to treat that water because it's old water. As everybody knows, the reservoirs are real low. So I believe that we're losing a lot of billions of gallons of water a year that go to the ocean. And we need to put more water into the reservoirs. We need to open those pumps. I'm actually here to oppose shutting those pumps down. I believe we need to send more water allocations to our communities. One of the reasons our communities are struggling is because people are really moving out of our cities. They're looking for work, for places who have water. So they are actually migrating to Arizona and other states. Our community is based on property taxes. People are leaving. You see more vacant homes, more homes that are for rent. Our community is proud to say that we have conserved water up to 29% compared to last year. And our city has been meters in the 1930s. We've been conserving, but sometimes it's not enough. We need more water. We've been struggling for the last 10 years to get the decent water allocations to provide water to our communities. It's not only Avenal, it's Colinga, it's Huron, Mendora, San Joaquin. It is really hard to see people not being able to feed their children. I know it's affecting other businesses, but our Central Valley does not have that luxury of taking their family to San Francisco to eat crab, fish, salmon. I believe our community is most important than the fisheries, and I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody in that business, but we actually believe our farmers, our community is more important than fish. I would like for you to stress and I think this is something that we all need to work together. We're not here to demand something that you guys cannot provide. We know that water is getting scarce. It's not enough water. But just remember that the voters approved Proposition 1A. They're the ones that are coming up and trying to save our reservoirs, trying to provide for more storage, and take that into consideration too, because we're the ones that are out there working, providing food to the table, and I hope that you listen to most of the communities that are migrating out of the state. I know some people don't believe that, but I've seen it with my eyes. And I just want you to take that into consideration. It's very hard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor. Rachel Eslick from the Fresno Chamber of Commerce.
Apologize for wasting time getting up here.
Oh yeah, I should be saying that'll be followed by Joseph Rio Frio, City Council member from Mendota.
Thank you, Chair Marcus and members of the board for this opportunity to speak. My name again is Rachel Eslick. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for the Fresno Chamber of Commerce. So I'm up here representing the business community of the greater area Fresno Chamber, which is about 1,200 members. The Central Valley was started by agriculture, and today it remains the center of commerce in our Central Valley. What happens in ag impacts all of us in the business community, and much like ag is the center of the business world, water is the center of the agricultural world. Now, I can't and I won't speak on behalf of farmers or laborers, but I can speak on behalf of the business community, which has been hit very hard by this drought. When land is fallowed, it's not just the farmer or the field workers that are suffering. Everyone suffers, from equipment sales to the insurance person to the pesticide company, and so on and so on and so on. So much land has been fallowed in the last 2 to 3 years that Fresno County, as of last year, is no longer the #1 agricultural county in the world. I was on one of the 4 buses that came up here today from the Central Valley, and I overheard one gentleman talking and saying that, you know, I really don't think that people get it outside of the Central Valley. I don't think people are going to understand how critical this situation is when they go to the store and they still see water on the shelves, or when they go to their faucet and their faucet still has water. I don't think people are going to get it until this situation is so desperate that everyone feels the crippling effects. And I hope it doesn't come to that, but you know, I'm here anyways to urge you guys on whatever level you can to recognize the situation is critical for a lot of people here, and for the decision that you guys can make today, I just hope that you'll take into consideration what's happening in the Central Valley, and if there is any extra water, to send it down our way, because we could definitely use it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, you should know that we are aware of it, and we are also aware of the fact that many people, particularly in large urban centers, are not aware of it. And so we've been doing quite a bit of unprecedented work for us on urban water conservation, and have all been out there spreading the word of how dire the situation is in the Central Valley and other parts of the state. So thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great.
Vice
And then
Chair.
just so I can say that, and the next person will be David Bitts from the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen.
Thank you. I'm Joseph Rio Frio. I'm I believe, 5-term city council member and former mayor of the city of Mendota. Born in Fresno, raised in Mendota. lady from the Chamber of Commerce, I don't know if she mentioned that Fresno's the raisin capital of the world.
Yeah.
We have on our city cards proudly, we are the cantaloupe capital of the world. But also cantaloupes, tomatoes, sweet corn, onions, nuts, all sorts of nuts, and tree fruits, and broccoli, and everything you can possibly imagine. Also, Mendota is what I call the epicenter of land retirement for reasons that the water wasn't able to drain via the San Luis drain, which was not completed. 200,000 acres a few years ago were put out of production. Couple that with years and years of drought and just dire situation. And I tip my hat to people that work in the fishing industry. I'm fortunate enough to have been able to, on more than one occasion, travel with my wife to San Francisco, to Pier 39, and she loves crab. She puts the bib on, and but I'm sure there's people here that love cantaloupe and love sweet corn and onions and all that good stuff that we produce out there. Yes, this past year we were not number one in ag, but we were number two